Q&A Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @Q&A Review, that is @CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@QNreview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the National on Friday the 31st of May 2024, from the news section. Jobs lost as Scottish firm in administration after 41 years. This article is written by Rebecca Newlands. Jobs have been lost as a Glasgow firm has gone into administration after more than 40 years. Administrators have been appointed to Riches HGV Training Centre Limited as of May 28, 2024. Founded in 1983, the company specialises in training HGV drivers for the haulage industry and construction plant and forklift operators. Their centre is based in the city's Springburn, and they serve private clients, district councils and utility companies. Michelle Elliott and Callum Carmichael of specialist business advisory firm FRP are acting as joint administrators. A total of 36 people have been made redundant, while administrators explore the potential sale of the business and assets, including vehicles, plant machinery and the site itself. Joint Administrator and Partner at FRP, Michelle Elliott, said, "Riches HGV Training Centre Limited was founded more than 40 years ago after the owner decided to use his own driving experience to train others. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing downturn of the construction sector and struggling to recover post-pandemic, the company was no longer able to meet its financial obligations. After the directors exhausted all other options, they took the difficult decision to put the company into administration. We're now focused on helping impacted staff access support from the Redundancy Payment Service and are working with support agency such as PACE while we market the assets of the business for sale." That article was written by Rebecca Newlands. This is from the National on Friday the 31st of May 2024, from the news section. Scottish Greens. John Swinney must halt grants for Israel-linked firms. This article is written by Hamish Morrison. John Swinney has been urged to immediately halt government grants from going to companies complicit in West Bank settlements. Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie said it was shocking and inexplicable public money was supporting arms companies the UN had deemed were complicit in Israeli settlements in Palestine. He demanded the Scottish Government consider its devolved responsibilities in relation to Israel's genocidal action against Palestine. Speaking at First Minister's Questions on Thursday, Swinney said he would need a firm legal basis to halt Scottish enterprise grants from going to companies the UN had said were complicit in Israel's illegal occupation of the West Bank. It comes after it was revealed earlier this month that Raytheon, BAE Systems and Leonardo had all received grants from Scottish enterprise, despite concerns about their links with Israel. All three companies make components, planes or bombs for the Israeli Defence Forces. Harvie said that despite past assurances from former First Minister Humza Yousaf that no companies profiting from Israel's bombardment of Gaza should receive public money, the Scottish Government has not yet taken this action to ban companies on the UN's list of complicit companies from receiving grants. He called for grants to be halted immediately. Swinney replied, "I will look carefully at the points that Mr. Harvey has raised about any support for companies that are involved in this activity. Our enterprise agencies have appropriate safeguards in place to ensure that any funding provided is used only for the specific purpose for which it is intended." I suspect in Mr. Harvey's question he wants me to extend that beyond that protection, and on that matter I would have to take great care to ensure we had a legal justification before so doing. But Harvey said the First Minister was not yet providing clarity on what the Scottish Government should do within its powers. He added, "The First Minister is right that they do not support the production of munitions with those grants, but that simply isn't enough. If you contribute to building a bigger bomb factory, you don't get to say that you haven't funded the production of the bombs." And even since October the 7th, Raytheon, BAE Systems and Leonardo have all received eye-watering sums from the Scottish Government's agency Scottish Enterprise. Swinney replied, "I don't think the analogy that he strikes about the construction of a weapons factory is a particularly fair analogy of the support that we put in place, but I will go away and look at that carefully. The point I was essentially raising in my earlier answer is that there will be a legal basis for us applying safeguards in relation to the issuing of grants, but we have to have a legal basis for saying why, on other issues not related to the Israel-Gaza conflict, that we would have a basis for not providing a grant. And that's not me being pedantic, that's just simply the legal basis on which the government got to act, and we have to always act within the law. I have to take the views of the law officers deadly seriously in the actions that we take. Scottish Enterprise has previously said it does not provide support for the development of munitions or weaponry. It said money given to the firms in question was unrelated to the deeply distressing situation in the Middle East. It has also said its due diligence human checks are robust. Leonardo, BAE Systems and Raytheon were approached for comment. That article was written by Hamish Morrison. This is from The National on Friday the 31st of May 2024 from the Culture section. Scottish Island Hotel named as the country's top romantic spa break. This article is written by Adam Robertson. The most romantic spa break in Scotland has been named in a new list, with the hotel the only place in the country to feature on the UK-wide list. The Daily Telegraph has published a list of Britain's most romantic spa breaks, and the Isle of Eriska Hotel is the only Scottish destination to feature. Ratings were issued by a team of expert reviewers who spent at least one night at every hotel, tried at least one meal, and trialled any other experiences which might have been on offer. Situated on the island of Eriska, at the entrance to Loch Crerran on Scotland's west coast, and features 34 bedrooms and suites in total, as well as 2 restaurants and luxury spa. It also features a heated swimming pool, a fully equipped gym, a sauna and a steam room. Overall, the Telegraph gave the hotel a rating of 8 out of 10 and gave particular praise for its Ishka and Espa spa treatments, as well as its sophisticated dining options. The newspaper said, "Treat your loved one to a night or two in one of the Scottish baronial mansion's luxurious spa suites. Set on a private island, accessible by a bridge, amid glorious scenery in the West Highlands, these rooms have their own hot tubs and private gardens. They really push the experience up there as one of Scotland's top luxury spa breaks for couples. That article was written by Adam Robertson. This is from The National on Friday the 31st of May 2024, from the comments section. The difference between the SNP and other parties must be exploited. This article is written by Professor Richard Murphy. Are you bored yet? As questions about this election go, that seems to be the most obvious to ask. That's because the Tories seem intent on turning this election into a fiasco. In contrast, Labour's great achievement is to say nothing, most especially when it comes to abuse of Diane Abbott, one of its longest-serving MPs. Meanwhile, the Lib Dem leader has fallen in a lake. And whenever these parties mention Scotland, it is invariably in the context of how the people of Scotland should do their duty to Westminster-focused parties. I suspect I overstate my case, but not by much. So far this election is boring, and that's also, by and large, true of the genuinely Scottish campaigns. Everything I see, read and hear so far says that nothing anyone has yet had to say about any aspect of the campaign, in or out of Scotland, is of any great significance. Mostly we have learned about Tory incompetence, Lib Dem attention-seeking, Labour aggression, most especially towards those who have recently been in that party, whilst the SNP wants, as Keir Starmer once did, to simply be taken seriously again, whilst pretending that the past does not matter. It is therefore to be hoped that this election might still come alive. It would be even better if something really relevant to Scotland comes out of it, apart from arguments on election debates. But what if it does not? Suppose that from now until July the 4th, we must suffer miserable campaigns from the unionist parties, all of whom are promoting the same basic idea. That idea is that politics cannot provide an answer to any known question, because consumer choice is the only thing they think that matters in life. And what each of these parties now believes is that whatever it is that the government offers, it does not involve consumer choice. As a result, every one of these politicians believes that their job is to offer less government. That is precisely why their offerings are, without exception, so uninspiring. In contrast, for all their own neoliberal failings, the SNP do reflect the belief in community that still exists in Scotland, but which is increasingly noticeable by its absence in England in particular. The result is that the SNP have a story to sell, even if the unionist independence line is ignored. The commitment to the community that they have gives them the chance to talk about how they have promoted social goals, in a way that sets them apart from the English-orientated parties that are their main competitors. I suggest that it is this difference that can stop this election being boring. The varying attitudes towards child poverty exemplify this difference and how it can be exploited. The Tories introduced the two-child benefit cap in England that has pushed 1 million children and their families into poverty. Labour are saying they cannot find the £1.8 billion required to relieve this poverty, although some very simple changes to the taxation of wealth would let them do so with ease. The Lib Dems say they will get rid of the cap, but so what? They have no chance of actually putting into effect any policy that they propose at this election, so small is the chance of a hung parliament. And then there are the SNP, who pioneered the baby box idea, and have also, since COVID, made additional payments to families in Scotland to support the most vulnerable children. Their policy on child poverty is distinct, decidedly different, and even daring when the resources made available to them by Westminster are constrained. They have proved that they can actually deliver a policy to tackle child poverty when others are not even showing an inclination to try. The difference in approach is significant and important. I should add it is almost unknown about outside Scotland, which is a fact that the other parties might be relying on. There is, however, no reason for people in Scotland to not know about it. That gives the SNP the chance to exploit their success with this policy as evidence that the division between them and the Unionist parties is much more significant than the simple issue of independence would suggest. The evidence that this policy approach provides is that the SNP still believe in the power of government to deliver benefit for the people of the country. Simultaneously, it is apparent that the English parties contesting this election do not believe this. They, instead, seem to believe that government is a burden to be suffered mainly by the well-off. If the SNP do not exploit this fundamental difference in approach towards the whole issue of governing and on the role of the government, then it is making a serious tactical mistake in this election campaign. They have to make clear that if the people of Scotland want to vote for a party that actually believe they can make a change, they have only one option available to them, and there is nothing boring about that. That article was written by Professor Richard Murphy.
This is from The National on Monday, 3rd June 2024. From the Politics section. Alex Cole-Hamilton squirms on BBC over independence question. By Ross Hunter. Alec Cole-Hamilton was left squirming after being asked if Scotland had a democratic route to gaining independence from the UK. During an appearance on BBC Scotland's Sunday show, the Scottish Lib Dem leader boldly claimed that voters don't care about independence. It came after presenter Martin Geisler quizzed Cole-Hamilton about whether the UK remained a voluntary union if there was no clear route to Scotland gaining independence. Is this a voluntary union that we're in at the moment? Asked Geisler. Of course it's a voluntary union, replied Cole-Hamilton. Geisler then asked what the democratic route out of the UK was. The reason I've not talked about independence is because literally nobody on the doorsteps is talking to me about it, said the Lib Dem leader. They don't care. Geisler then pointed out that polls show around 50% of Scots being consistently in favour of independence and pressed Cole-Hamilton for an answer. He said, really important question, really simple question. If we are not being held in this union against our will, what is the democratic exit route? Cole-Hamilton said, we don't believe there should be a second referendum, and ultimately, though, this is a voluntary union. It's not that there's no way out. It's not salient to people right now. People want to talk about getting access to a GP at the first time of asking, or NHS dentists in their locality, taking sewage out of our rivers and lifting up Scottish education to where it used to be. Growing frustrated with Cole-Hamilton avoiding the question, Geisler said, you're not answering my question at all. I'm trying to give you space to answer it, but you're just refusing to answer it. What is the democratic route out of this voluntary union? Cole-Hamilton then claimed it would be arrogant for unionist parties to detail exactly how Scotland would exit the union. He said, I'm not going to sort of hypothecate a written constitution that doesn't exist in terms. I mean, part of it would be quite arrogant for a political party to say Britain needs a constitution, and here you are, guys, here's one we made earlier. I think we need to do all of that in consultation with the people that send us to Parliament. Geisler replied, that's a problem, isn't it? You haven't answered the question. Cole Hamilton then accused Geisler of fighting the general election of 2019 all over again. Geisler said he was simply trying to get a straight answer. That article was by Ross Hunter. This is from The National on Monday, 3rd June 2024, from the News section. Jet2 airline launches new ski route schedule from Scottish airports, by Adam Robertson. An airline and holiday company has unveiled a new ski route schedule for next year. Jet2 announced details of its latest programme from Edinburgh and Glasgow airports and promised to offer customers a fantastic choice of flights to the best ski destinations in Europe. Next winter, the airline will operate flights to 5 top ski destinations, including Chambly, Geneva, Salzburg, Innsbruck and Turin from Edinburgh Airport, while services to Geneva will be on sale from Glasgow Airport. The firm said it gives skiers and snowboarders in Scotland direct access to the French, Austrian, Swiss and Italian Alps, as well as to the Tyrolean Mountains for the winter 2025 to 26. It said it is already experiencing strong demand and has responded by putting its ski programme on sale early. A wide selection of ski services are available from December 2025 and will operate throughout the winter season. Chief Executive of Jet.com and Jet2 Holidays, Steve Heapy, hailed the move and said the feedback from customers is that they are wanting to book ahead and secure their place on the slopes for next winter. We're always listening to our customers and responding to what they're telling us, so have put a fantastic ski programme on sale for winter 25-26 from Edinburgh and Glasgow airports. With 5 ski destinations on sale, we are giving skiers and snowboarders the chance to book ahead and get access to some of the best ski resorts in Europe. He continued, skiers and snowboarders travelling with Jet2.com next winter can take advantage of our VIP customer service and 22 kilo bag of baggage and ski allowance, and for this reason we expect our winter 25-26 ski programme to be a huge success. That article was by Adam Robertson. This is from The National on Monday, 3rd June 2024, from the Politics section. John Swinney slams Labour migration plans at SNP Westminster launch, by James Walker. John Swinney hit out at the current hostility towards migration after Keir Starmer's recent pledge to cut net migration. Speaking at the SNP's Westminster campaign launch in front of activists and party candidates in Glasgow, the First Minister listed why he believes Scotland needs migration. One of the things that crops up in all my conversations with business is that they are short of people, he said. Unemployment in Scotland today is very low and has been for a number of years, and we are in a situation where businesses are struggling to find employees to fill vacancies. Swinney added that migration is also crucial when it comes to decreasing NHS waiting times. You need enough people providing social care packages in the community, he added, as he rallied against the impact of Brexit. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's migration plan will include passing laws to ban law-breaking employers from hiring foreign workers and to train more Britons. Last year's net migration figure of 685,000 has got to come down, he told The Sun on Sunday, as he vowed to control our borders and make sure British businesses are helped to hire Brits first. Pledges to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands have been repeatedly made by Conservative politicians over recent years, including by Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron during his time as party leader. In his speech, Swinney accused the Labour Party of giving an awfully good impression of the Tories. I'm not saying Labour are exactly the same as the Tories, they're not, but they are giving an awfully good impersonation of them, he said. The only substantive change Labour seem to be offering is to change their own core principles. Let me give you one really telling and worrying example. Their health spokesman, Wes Streeting, the man who in a few weeks' time will be the UK government's health secretary, last week set out his plans for the NHS. He said that Streeting criticised the Tories on the issue of the NHS and the private sector. Swinney added, fair enough, you might say. Bad news. He was not criticising the Tories for using the private sector too much. He was criticising the Tories for not using the private sector enough. He went on to say he wanted to go further than Tony Blair's New Labour. And he wrote, I want the NHS to form partnerships with the private sector that goes beyond just hospitals. That sounds an awful lot like creeping privatisation of the NHS to me. The SNP rejects privatisation of the NHS, whether that is Tory privatisation or Labour privatisation. Also speaking at the launch, SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn said Scotland deserves so much more than the status quo. Flynn said his party had provided the baby box, lifted 100,000 children out of poverty, provided young people with free public transport and a nationalised rail service. He added, what we have in Westminster is a status quo. It's a desire, as Keir Starmer says, for stability. I'll tell you what stability means. It means £18 billion worth of cuts to our public services. It means no access to the European market for more than 5 million people. He decried privatisation of the NHS and said the people of Scotland should have the democratic right to choose their own future. He said, we deserve so much more. Scotland deserves so much more, and that is all why all of us on this stage and all of you in this room are for Scotland. It's why we always put Scotland's interests first. We believe in better. We believe in a nation where we can invest in our future. That article was by James Walker. This is from The National on Monday, 3rd June 2024. From the News section. Tributes paid to victims 30 years on from RAF Chinook crash. By Gregor Young. Tributes have been paid to the 29 people killed in the RAF Chinook helicopter crash at a service to mark the 30th anniversary of the disaster. The helicopter, carrying leading security personnel, crashed on the Mull of Kintyre Peninsula on the west coast of Scotland on June 2nd, 1994. The aircraft was on its way from RAF Aldergrove near Belfast to a security conference in Inverness when it crashed into a hillside in thick fog. Family, friends and colleagues of the 29 people who died on June 2nd, 1994 gathered at Southend Parish Church on Sunday, where a service to honour their memory was held at 12:30 p.m. The Reverend Roddy McNider, who was the parish minister at the time of the crash, delivered the sermon and described the 25 passengers and 4 crew who died as extraordinary people who were selflessly devoted to duty in the service of their country. Addressing the congregation, he said, "Our service this early afternoon continues our promise that we care. This church is here for you and your families and loved ones to remember, to honour their memory and their service, to bring the gift of encouragement sensitively and graciously, and to hold fast the standards and principles they represented. We wish to say lovingly that in our hearts and prayers and those of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland reaffirmed when it met in the 3rd week of May this year, we will not forget. The service was organised by Reverend Stephen Sass, Minister of the Kintyre Parishes, with the support of Reverend Colin Bell, Senior Chaplain to the 38th Irish Brigade, part of the British Army. The incident in 1994 was the worst RAF peacetime disaster, and the reasons for the crash remain unclear. The pilots, Flight Lieutenants Jonathan Tapper and Richard Cook, were initially accused of gross negligence over the crash. But a review of the incident in 2011 found the pilots should not have been blamed. A special act of remembrance is being held at a memorial cairn at the crash site on Sunday afternoon. McNider said, "The beautiful and lovingly built cairn that stands on the Mull in remembrance of the great sadness of the 2nd of June 1994 honours loved ones named there, their families and friends. Each name inscribed on this cairn, and which shines out every time the sun reflects upon it, calls us to remember the unique person whose name is written there, and to acknowledge our memories, experiences and encounters with them, along with the hopes of what might have been over these 30 years and years still to come." McNider said many people from the local community in Argyll and Bute, including lighthouse keepers and their wives, the local GP and local members of the Coast Guard, were involved in responding to the crash. He said, "The police, ambulance and fire brigade attended from Campbelltown, with support personnel responding from many other places, both within Argyll and from further afield," he added. Support and compassionate care was provided both in the immediacy of the accident and in the many months to follow to the families and relatives of those who died, and also to their colleagues. The response from the local parish was unconditional and continues to this day, as does the compassion of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. That article was by Gregor Young.
From the National, Tuesday, the 4th of June, from the comment section, "Axe the council tax and bring in double by making rich pay." Article by trade union organiser for the Scottish Socialist Party, Richie Venton. Think about the song Imagine, as John Lennon might have written it today. Imagine no austerity, no cuts or closures too. For Scotland's councils, it isn't hard to do. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. But this is not a dream. It's time politicians woke up to accept there is absolutely no excuse for the butchery to communities and workforces that are busily carrying out in the 6th richest economy on earth. Brand new figures in Scottish incomes prove the alternative advocated by the Scottish Socialist Party since their formation in 1998 would literally double the funding for our local authorities. It would obliterate every excuse for every single cut to local services, jobs, community facilities or increased service charges. And it would guarantee an additional £2 billion to expand services and improve lives nationwide. Not a dream, a very concrete, immediate reality. We're talking here about just one string of the SSP's bow when it comes to redistribution of wealth from the rich to the rest of us. Outright abolition of the unfair regressive council tax and its replacement by an income-based Scottish service tax devised by the Scottish Socialist Party based on ability to pay, with a succession of tax bands and progressively rising taxation rates. The first £12,000 of a person's income would be entirely exempt. The income bracket £12,000 to £30,000 would pay 4.5% towards local jobs and services, peaking at 20% service tax on all income above £100,000. Councillors and MSPs in the Tory, Labour, SNP and Scottish Green parties are raking working class communities with a poisonous cocktail of closures, skyrocketing charges for community facilities and social care and job losses, while keeping the regressive council tax that hammers low and middle income families. In South Lanarkshire, the Labour and Tory coalition is shutting libraries, community centres and youth hubs like there's no tomorrow, there will be nothing left in Blantyre, Cambuslang or Rutherglen if they get away with it. In Glasgow, the SNP and Scottish Green Party councillors slashed yet another £150 million off services, chopping 450 teachers' jobs, butchering health and social care for the most vulnerable. Austerity begins in Westminster, where the Tories mete out savage cuts to Scottish budgets, and the Labour government in waiting brazenly pledged to stick with Tory spending limits. Then, instead of defying the Tories' war on public services, refusing to implement their austerity, the SNP/Scottish Green Party coalition's annual Scottish budgets have devolved the cuts to colleges, local authorities, etc. In turn, spineless councillors implement this butchery, refusing to fight for the people who elected them. Devastation in communities follows. For 25 years, the SSP has fought for both the Scottish Government and councils to set no cuts defiance budgets. For MSPs and councillors to discover a spine, stand up, give a fighting lead and help mobilise protest meetings, demonstrations, strikes and occupations of threatened community facilities. We've fought to build a mass campaign to win back some of the £5 billion stolen from the Scottish budgets by the Tory Razor Gang, funding theft which Starmer's Labour swear they will continue, and from the Scottish Government, which devolved the destruction instead of defying and defeating Westminster austerity. Alongside that, for 25 years the Scottish Socialist Party has fought for emergency legislation to abolish the council tax and replace it with a more progressive Scottish service tax based on personal incomes, taxing 75% of people less and the rich far, far more. Back in 2007, spotting the popular support for our street campaigns and demos to axe the tax, the SNP fought the Scottish elections promising to scrap it. After 17 years in government, they've done absolutely nothing to abolish the hated council tax, and for 25 years Labour have opposed its abolition. The Scottish Socialist Party support neither council tax increases nor the council tax freeze. We call for its outright abolition and replacement by an income-based Scottish service tax. Our calculations, based on the latest available government statistics, show this would double funding for local jobs and services, from £2.7 billion council tax to £5.3 billion under a Scottish service tax. This would shield every job, workers' wage and public service from the present round of cuts, and still provide another £2 billion towards measures like free public transport for all, district heating systems to cut bills and an emergency programme of council house building, all creating tens of thousands of jobs in the process. Some 1.8 million Scots wouldn't pay a penny, because their incomes are below £12,000. A worker on £30,000 will still only pay £810 a year, a far cry from today's punitive council tax bills. In sharp contrast, a minuscule handful of the very richest, about 13,000 people with incomes over £200,000 each, would have to stump up a total of £1 billion, one-fifth of the total £5.3 billion annual Scottish service tax raised. That's what a progressive tax looks like, making the rich pay. This is no pipe dream, but an immediate, practical application of socialist principles, well within the powers of the Scottish Parliament, even within the straitjacket of devolution. Politicians bearing all colours of rosettes bleat, "There's nothing we can do about cuts and closures. We don't have the money." They should grow a collective spine, abolish the regressive council tax, replace it with a Scottish service tax based on income, tax the rich, and double council funds, thereby ending the devastation facing communities. Imagine. And that was a comment piece by Richie Venton, trade union organiser of the Scottish Socialist Party. From the National, Tuesday the 4th of June, from the comment section. Steph Payton, voters will always come last under first past the post, by columnist Steph Payton. When Lord Peter Cruda spoke during the Conservative Democratic Organisation conference at Bournemouth International Centre in Bournemouth last year, his address provided a harrowing insight into the minds of the British political class. In laying out his stall to the gathered grassroots Tories, This close ally of Boris Johnson alleged that a Labour victory at the next general election would spell doom for the future of the Tory party. If Labour win a big majority at the next election, he opined, they will reduce the voting age to 16, they will abolish voter ID, and will introduce proportional representation, making it almost impossible for the Conservative Party to win an outright majority in the future. We will become a country of coalition governments, and outright governments will be a thing of the past. The core of his message, it seems, was that an electoral system that empowers people to vote freely and fairly is an inherent threat to the future Conservative government, that given a choice out with the imposed constraints of Westminster's archaic and undemocratic first-past-the-post system, the public would reject the tired two-party system. What kind of mandate do the Conservatives believe they have to govern when, by their own admission, it is power that can only be maintained by mangling the democratic process? Westminster's electoral system does not encourage people to vote with hope beyond the hope of the least worst option winning. It forces us not to pick a candidate with good policies or politics, but to find one that actually has a chance of winning and who will likely do the least damage, all while navigating the various roadblocks and diversions set up by the government to disenfranchise those likely to vote for their opponents, namely young people and students. The game is rigged. That much is clear when the government explicitly rules out the use of student ID as a passable form of identification for voting, while a bus pass for those over the age of 60 will suffice. The Tories' haunted hat stand, Jacob Rees-Mogg, has acknowledged as much, stating that those who are attempting to gerrymander elections end up finding that their clever schemes come back to bite them, as I dare say we found by insisting on voter ID for elections. The contempt for young voters that radiates from UK parliamentary parties is one that they will carry with them into the voting booths next month, assuming that they can even get past the front door with whatever ID they have in possession. As with many Western institutions with an assumption of superiority, the cracks are showing. The response to the genocide in Gaza has fundamentally eroded its claims to moral leadership, while the supposed mother of parliaments in London is infected by a disdain for democracy that sees parties oppose a fairer system because they know that what is good for the voting public is bad for dominance of the political scene. So we enter an election where the tantalising prospect of a severely diminished Tory party is somewhat undercut by the prospect of a Labour government more aligned with Margaret Thatcher's worldview than Keir Hardie's, and, for all of Cruda's warning of electoral reform, should Labour win the next election, Starmer's party is still wary of meaningful electoral reform, despite the membership supporting it. Though, as a serial flip-flopper, even if he did voice support for fixing a broken electoral system, it would mean less than nothing to me until the moment it actually, if ever, happened. Instead, Labour activists seem more focused on shaming those sceptical of Starmer's meagre offerings and support for genocidal regimes in the Middle East, lambasting that opposing them is providing a route back in for the Conservatives. It is that entitlement to power which has left many wondering if this is really the best the political class has to offer. Well, yes. First past the post benefits Labour as much as it does the Tories, locking the nations of the United Kingdom and the UK to an eternal tennis match between two familiar foes, content only to passing power back and forth while we all watch on from the sidelines. Westminster is a stalwart of the status quo. It does not change and, in turn, demands we do not change against it. And without a carrot with which to lead, the Conservatives only have the stick to offer, concocted national service schemes that play to an audience that hates young people, and crackdowns on free expressions and the right to protest. The democratic deficit is, to me, still one of the most compelling arguments for Scottish independence, and the current general election is a perfect example of why. There is no hope in the future of British politics as it stands, and, until there is a change to a system of proportional representation, we are condemned to remain watching from the sidelines as the embedded parties busy themselves with only the drive to win, to attract corporate sponsors, and to disenfranchise and shame any who pose a threat to their hegemonic rule. And that was a comment piece by Steph Payton. From the National, Tuesday the 4th of June, from the news section, Borders Book Festival ends Baillie Gifford sponsorship with regret. Article written by Ross Hunter. The Borders Book Festival will no longer be sponsored by Baillie Gifford after activists called on literary festivals to end their relationship with the investment firm. Last month, Fossil Free Books, a collective of book industry workers and authors, wrote an open letter to 9 UK literary festivals calling on them to end their relationships with Baillie Gifford unless the company severed all of its ties to fossil fuel giants and companies involved in Israeli occupation, apartheid and genocide. The Edinburgh International Book Festival announced that it would be ending its long-term partnership with Baillie Gifford last week after claiming that pressure from campaigners on staff had become intolerable. Now the Borders Book Festival has followed suit. A statement released by festival bosses said, "The directors have announced that after 2024, the Borders Book Festival will no longer be sponsored by Baillie Gifford, following protests around their sponsorship of this and other book festivals. We took this decision with great regret because we've enjoyed 8 happy and productive years working together to make our festival better, more accessible and in particular more attractive to children and families. Without the support of Baillie Gifford, we would not have been able to mount such a vibrant and varied children's festival where adults go free and do all that we do with schools and the borders. Baillie Gifford's support has enabled us to put free books into the hands of thousands of children, and that aspect of the support will be sorely missed. We wish to put on record our thanks to the company for their solid and passionate support, not only for our festival, its authors and audiences, but for all the book festivals across Britain who have benefited from Baillie Gifford's commitment to the world of books and readers." It mirrors Edinburgh International Book Festival Chief Executive Jenny Niven's reluctance to end the partnership at the behest of campaigners. She said that undermining the long-term future of charitable organisations such as book festivals is not the right way to bring about change. Baillie Gifford said only 2% of its clients' money was invested in fossil fuel firms, and added that claims that it has significant amounts invested in the occupied Palestinian territories were offensively misleading. However, Fossil Free Books state that the firm has between £2.5 to £5 billion invested in the fossil fuel industry, with a further £10 billion invested in companies with direct or indirect links to Israel's defence, tech and cybersecurity industries, including Nvidia, Amazon and Alphabet. Following Edinburgh International Book Festival's decision to end the partnership, Nick Thomas, a partner at Baillie Gifford, said, "Baillie Gifford is a long-term investor with high ethical standards and a complete focus on doing what is right by our clients. The assertion that we have significant amounts of money in the occupied Palestinian territories is offensively misleading. Baillie Gifford is a large investor in several multinational technology companies, including Amazon, Nvidia, and Meta. Demanding divestment from these global companies, used by millions of people around the world, is unreasonable and serves no purpose. Much as it would be unreasonable to demand authors boycott Instagram or stop selling books on Amazon." And that article was written by Ross Hunter and read by me, Ian McKenna. From the National, Tuesday the 4th of June, from the politics section. Fazia Shaheen resigns from Labour over cruel candidacy decision. Report by Alistair Ferguson. Former Labour candidate Fazia Shaheen has resigned from the party over the cruel and devastating decision to block her from being able to stand in the upcoming general election. Shaheen announced the news with a statement posted on Twitter/X, stating that it is with very heavy heart she has come to the decision. In her statement, she said she has encountered relentless unfair treatment from the Labour Party, including bullying and Islamophobia. Shaheen had been expected to win the Chingford and Woodford Green seat for Labour from former Tory leader Ian Duncan Smith, after losing out by just 2.6% of the vote in 2019. However, she said on Wednesday evening that she had been blocked from standing in the seat again by Labour's National Executive Committee, NEC. She has now taken the decision to leave the party after her deselection as a candidate for the Chingford and Woodford Green seat. The post read, Since the Conservatives won power in 2010, I have used all the tools available to me, from my research to my activism, to fight them on public spending cuts, inequality and divisive narratives. That is why to leave the Labour Party now, on the cusp of finally seeing the Tories out of government at a time when I should be celebrating, is crushing. Shaheen went on to say, being removed as a candidate has been cruel and devastating, especially after local voters and party members have placed so much faith in me. Then later added, I cannot, in all conscience, continue to contribute to a party that seems to think so little of people like me and have moved so far away from my values. She has already said she is considering running as an independent in the constituency and that she will make a further announcement about her next steps tomorrow. The professor at the London School of Economics International Inequalities Institute's resignation follows the news last week when she said she would be taking legal action against Labour over her deselection. The Labour Party banned her from being a candidate due to liking a series of social media posts on Twitter/X that allegedly downplayed anti-Semitism accusations. Last Thursday, Shaheen said, "This campaign of prejudice, bullying and spiteful behaviour has finally been rewarded by Labour's NEC, and my name has been added to the list of those not welcome in the candidate club. And it is no surprise that many of those excluded are people of colour." She added, "I have come to the inescapable conclusion that Labour, far from being a broad church encompassing different views, has an ingrained culture of bullying, a palpable problem with black and brown people, and thinks nothing of dragging a person's good name through the mud in pursuit of a factional agenda, with no thought of the impact on committee members' mental health and well-being." Shaheen had also appeared on Newsnight just an hour after her hearing. Her candidacy had been blocked. At the time, she expressed she was in a state of shock and had offered an apology to her supporters. She also said she did not remember liking the post in question. The Labour Party had been approached for comment. And the article was written by Alistair Ferguson. From the National, Tuesday the 4th of June, from the news section. Scottish boxer Andrew Tam dies after motorbike crash. Article by Adam Robertson. A Scottish boxer has died in hospital 3 days after being injured in a motorbike crash. Andrew Tam, known as Andy, was riding a Kawasaki motorcycle when it was involved in a crash with a Hyundai Tucson car in Cumbernauld, North Lanarkshire on Thursday. The crash happened on the B8039 near Lenzie Mill Road at around 6:50 p.m. Emergency services attended and Mr. Tam was taken to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow, but he died on Sunday. The boxer, from Cumbernauld, was named Scottish Featherweight Champion in 2023. Police Sergeant Gemma Blackadder said, "Our thoughts are very much with Andrew's family and friends at what must be a very difficult time for them. Inquiries into the full circumstances of this crash continue. If you believe you have information that will assist our inquiries, or if you have any dashcam footage, please contact 101 quoting incident number 3307 of May the 30th. And the article was written by Adam Robertson.
The National, recorded on Wednesday, 5th of June 2024. The Culture section. Exclusive interview. Elaine C. Smith talks child catcher role in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang by Adam Robertson, multimedia journalist. Elaine C. Smith is the first to admit that even she used to be a little bit scared by her latest role. "I was about 10 when Chitty Chitty Bang Bang came out, and I loved the music, but I did find it quite terrifying," the actress told The National. Known for her comedic turns in the likes of Rab C. Nesbitt and Two Doors Down, Smith has now taken on the role of the child catcher in the latest version of the classic book and film. Looking back, she says that although counting herself as a fan of the original, she distinctly remembers it appealing more to boys than girls. "I've noticed in audiences coming that a lot of men really enjoy it and saying it was their favourite film, but that's not to stereotype. I was more about Doris Day and Calamity Jane." The latest production is playing a number of dates across various cities in Scotland, including Glasgow, Aberdeen and Inverness, with tickets available here. www.atgtickets.com/shows /chitty-chitty-bang-bang, with Smith taking part in the Scottish dates rather than the entire tour. Reflecting on her new role, Smith says she was excited to have the chance to play an out-and-out villain after so long in comedy. I'd done it before when I was Miss Hannigan in Annie, and it was great to play a baddie, she says. I'd taken my own kids to see it when Paula Grady played the role. It's a weird thing because even in Panto, when I've been a wicked queen, the audience sometimes don't know whether to clap or cheer. She added, in a career you want a bit of variety. It's one of the reasons I've stayed clear of soap. That's not to say there's anything wrong with that, but you can get stuck as an actor. You want challenges and different things to do. What about the pressure of taking on such an iconic role though? The film is beloved by so many, with Australian actor Robert Helpman putting in a memorable turn as the character in the 1968 film. While some actors might be wary of taking inspiration from previous takes on the role for fear of feeling pressure, Smith went in the opposite direction. Yes, I watched it back. It was dark and that brilliant actor played it in the film really creepy and quite terrifying. Loads of people say it frightened them as kids, but you also remember the lighter stuff, all about the flying car and the relationship with his dad and kids. It's interesting now researching it because the book was written by Ian Fleming, but Roald Dahl had a lot to do with the screenplay, which accounts for the darkness in it. In spite of that darkness though, the story clearly has an enduring appeal, and Smith points to one moment in particular that stands out. When the car flies, Smith says, I got quite tearful because I was watching a production of it and the orchestra started playing and the audience was clapping along. That joy is something the actress believes audiences have been particularly keen on following the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. Having not been able to gather, people want a bit of joy and laughter and all those things, just that bit of familiarity. There's so many lovely moments throughout, but you really can't top that car flying on stage. It's just nostalgia. With a cost of living crisis as well, theatre tickets are so expensive, so if you're going to take your family to something, you want to be sure of what you're getting. By Adam Robertson. The National, recorded on Tuesday, 4th of June 2024. The Culture Section. Review, Jane's Addiction Review, Barrowland's Gig and Near Homecoming, by Che Woodman. Before the stylistic early 90s rock fad of sonic lumberjack plaid took hold, a home turf band swam deep in their Los Angeles back garden, breathing in moonlit beaches and neon-signed late-night carnage before trying to change the world. Almost single-handedly responsible for guiding the fiercest of hair metal offenders to jump on a spandex bonfire of their own making, including Kiss Light Motley Crue, who had by then permanently turned everything up to 11. They arrived armed with the coolest and heaviest sounds, mixing up Joy Division, Led Zeppelin and Bad Brains, naturally adding their own musical potions and dark cabaret. Purveyors of a newer version of a much fresher rock sound and poised to be stadium-level huge, kicking their self-made door wide open, with Nirvana and Nine Inch Nails quickly overtaking faded and ripped-sleeved Guns N' Roses tees at gigs. But Jane's Addiction decided to hit the exit sign in 1991, leaving behind two unshakable alt-rock album monoliths, Nothing Shocking and Ritual de la Habitual. A London gig a few days before appeared to be a fun, appreciative gathering, but every non-Scottish band knows that if you give a Glasgow crowd respect and energy, you've got them for life. This was to be nothing short of a near homecoming that some had waited 33 years for since their last visit to the Barras. This reviewer was there, and that time gap was quickly wiped away from the opening slow build of Eric Avery's bass intro for Up the Beach. Well, it's easy to forget that Avery had taken a decade-long JA sabbatical, resisting the temptation to rejoin, and instead picked up the bass gig for Garbage. During that time, his old band released some great albums, although any material from Strays and The Great Escape remain absent from the setlist. Yet despite rarely reaching these shores, we had to wait until this tour, along with drummer Stephen Perkins, to get a rhythm section that glides into absolute mystical chemistry. We're thrown only one new song, Imminent Redemption, snake-like and drum-heavy, and not too far from their sound and ritual. Dave Navarro punches out blasts of guitar and ocean sighs while displaying his usual trademark coolness, and being easily among the greats such as the late Geordie Walker from Killing Joke and Jimmy Page's Dragon Trousers. Perkins is having an utter flailing limb party, from large-scale festivals to small venues like the long-gone Network in Edinburgh back in 1990. He remains as ever a punk rock drum machine, and tonight he's draped in the town's own Asia Records shirt and a kilt. The stage floodlights are raised after stop to signal a lack of an encore. The bar's audience is not happy. Within seconds the band return. You guys just won't let us leave. And then they're storming their way through Mountain Song and a tune so epic that it could give Axl Rose nightmares 3 days. Again, the floodlights are beamed out. Glasgow erupts. What? The big Shake Your Booty song will go unaired? The lights sharply dim again. There was a time that I'd come into your city and rip off everything from the thrift stores. And so we leave with Been Caught Stealing singing in our ears. When you regroup into the original classic lineup and return to being one of the greatest bands in the world, 33 years seems like a weekend off. Glasgow knows. By Che Woodman, The National. Recorded on Wednesday, 5th of June 2024. The Culture Section. The sleepy Scottish town that played crucial role in D-Day landings. By James Walker, political reporter. Situated in a quiet stretch of coastline in Dumfries and Galloway, the peaceful village of Garliston does not look like a place that played a crucial role in the Second World War. For anyone arriving in the village, the road sign proclaiming Garliston, the birthplace of the Mulberry Harbour, 1943, gives a hint of the important part it played in the Normandy landings. For it was here that the pierhead and floating roadways used to unload troops, vehicles and stores were developed in the year leading up to D-Day on June 6, 1944. The idea for the Mulberry Harbours came after the disastrous Allied raid on the German-occupied French port of Dieppe in 1942, during which more than 3,500 of those who landed were killed, wounded or captured. The Allies realised that if they could not capture a French port, they would have to build their own, and the idea of the portable Mulberry Harbours was born. As plans for D-Day progressed, part of Garliston Harbour and nearby Rig Bay and Cairn Head in Dumfries and Galloway were used to test prototype roadways, with the military arriving to requisition areas in May 1943. Garliston resident Roy Taylor, who was involved in publishing the book A Harbour Goes to War, believed the area was chosen because it was off the radar and conditions were similar to the French coast. He said, "It was a long way from anywhere, and also because the tidal range was very similar and the beach conditions were very similar to those in Normandy. The tidal range is about 24 feet here, so that was a good analogue for what was going to be encountered over in Normandy. I think there was surprise among local people, but acceptance because people understood that it was part of the war effort, and clearly, if they had chosen Garliston as location, then there must have been an element of secrecy required. Most German reconnaissance flights would be into the south of England, maybe up as far as Birmingham, maybe even Manchester, but I don't think they ran much in the way of reconnaissance over Scotland, though Glasgow docks were bombed, and Northern Ireland as well. I just think it was off the radar. 3 prototypes known as Hippo, Swiss Roll and the Spud Pier, combined with a floating whale roadway, were tested, with the latter chosen as the one used for the Normandy landings. The pier could be jacked up or down to ensure the berthing platforms was stable, and the roadways, which rested in floating pontoons codenamed Beetles, connected the pier to the shore. To shelter the ships and roadways, huge breakwaters were constructed to form harbours off the French coast, with one known as Mulberry A for the Americans established at Omaha Beach, and Mulberry B built at Sword Beach, near Arromanches, for the British and Canadians. The different sections of the harbours were taken across the English Channel and assembled in the days following D-Day. Taylor said the harbours played a pivotal role in the Normandy landings, as they helped maintain supply lines. He said, "We could have landed troops and tanks, but as people learn repeatedly through history, your army is only as good as the supply lines behind it, and that was really what Mulberry delivered. It was a conveyor belt of ships just coming along and disgorging stores and tanks and troops. I think they were pivotal to keeping supply lines going after the D-Day invasion, and also for evacuating the wounded as well." While Mulberry A was destroyed in a severe storm that began in June 19, 1944, Mulberry B survived, and over the course of 10 months, more than 2 million men, 500,000 vehicles, and 4 million tons of supplies were landed. Taylor said the part Garliston played in the construction of the Mulberry Harbours has a legacy in the village, where people are proud of that role it played in history. An exhibition open from Friday to Sunday in the village hall tells of the story of the Mulberry Harbours, and a parade is due to take place in Garliston on June 6 to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day. by James Walker.
The National, on Wednesday the 5th of June. Opinion. Political parties of all colours need to be a lot more professional. A column written by Caitlin Logan. As of April, the basic annual salary for a Westminster MP is £91,346. This puts MPs in the top 5% of earners in the UK, implying that the level of responsibility, knowledge and skill expected of them is higher than for most of us. Not necessarily the description that jumps to mind for some of those who grace the House of Commons with their presence, but perhaps it should be. These are the people who shape and pass the laws that tell us what to do and how to do it. They're supposed to represent their local constituents, to hold the government to account, or, if they're lucky, to be a part of it and take on even more powerful and highly paid ministerial roles. None of these are responsibilities to take lightly, and most of us would surely want to grant them only to the most committed and capable. So why do political parties repeatedly fail to reflect the seriousness of the role in their selection processes? Whether it's candidates who are off the rails and should never have been selected in the first place, or candidates being hung out to dry as part of a political power play, the entire spectacle undermines any notion of a rigorous, fair and thoughtful process. It may be anachronistic or simply naive to expect our political leaders to set an example, but considering that politicians are, based on annual polling, the least trusted profession and hemorrhaging trust by the minute, maybe it's something they should try to do, at least for the sake of preserving democracy, if that's still a reasonable goal. As it stands, from an outsider's perspective, our politics appears to be conducted in a more unprofessional and chaotic manner than just about any other industry. Imagine for a moment that Diane Abbott had worked in another field, giving nearly 40 years of her life to one organisation, at times in prominent roles, and leading the way for many women of colour to follow in her footsteps. Regardless of anyone's opinion of Ms Abbott or the newspaper's letter that saw her suspended from the Labour Party, to keep her hanging on for more than a year, only to reinstate her after an election was called, then play a ridiculous game of hokey-cokey in public over whether she was in or out as a candidate, is frankly obscene. In any other line of work, this behaviour by an organisation's management would be outrageous. Imagine that Faiza Shaheen was a candidate for a role in some other workplace, a place she had volunteered her time to support and gained the praise and endorsement of its leader, as Ms Shaheen did from Sir Keir Starmer when she ran in 2019. Picture any normal organisation waiting until the 11th hour to summon someone in this position to a meeting that same day, pulling them up about their social media use over a number of years, alleging engagement with anti-Semitic content, and then swiftly emailing a decision to cut ties with them, while simultaneously briefing the media about their rejection. Even if you accept the premise that Ms Shaheen expressed views that made her, rightly or wrongly, unelectable, this is not a good look. It either speaks to a lack of due diligence in the first instance, or a decision to disingenuously take issue with a person's comments when it feels expedient to get rid of them. It seems common sense that if social media activity is now such a vital determinant of someone's suitability to stand for election, parties should conduct their own research and have open discussions with potential candidates about this well in advance of selection. More than anything, this is a protective measure for candidates so that their late-night Twitter commentary or liking history doesn't end up as front-page news. Instead, the approach taken by Labour gives the strong impression that the timing and publicity of these decisions are designed to cause the individuals in question the greatest stress and reputational damage possible. I don't expect that approach to inspire people to want to put themselves forward for the party in future, nor can I see how it's inspiring to voters. Just because a political party isn't legally bound to treat their candidates and MPs as an employer must, this doesn't mean they shouldn't have a duty of care to their people. And if they don't feel that moral imperative, If this is how cold, how calculated they can be in their treatment of their own representatives, it raises the question, what will they do with the rest of us? This isn't only about Labour, though. The Conservatives have been scrambling just to find enough people to stand for them, despite the fact that their own party called the election. The words piss up and brewery come to mind. But this is part of the problem. A system where a government can choose to call an election at any moment only serves to undermine the ability of parties to find the best people and to prepare them. In previous years, the SNP has had its own share of embarrassing candidates, and indeed MPs. The fine people of Kirkcaldy and East Kilbride, who voted SNP and now have representatives from entirely different parties, might have an idea of what I'm talking about. For smaller parties like the Scottish Greens, candidate selection for a general election might seem a less significant task, given the remote possibility of their election. But standing as a parliamentary candidate is in and of itself a high-pressure and high-profile endeavour. Thus, the Greens have found themselves in their own deselection drama this year because of a candidate's choice remarks about author J.K. Rowling. The now dumped candidate, who is a trans woman, had been engaging high-profile gender-critical individuals on the subject of trans rights on X, formerly known as Twitter, which is a perilous activity at the best of times. It struck me as disappointing that a party which speaks so strongly about the advancement of the rights of marginalised groups would throw a trans person into an undeniably vulnerable position without providing sufficient training, support and advice to ensure that they were equipped to handle the campaign process and everything that might come with it. Parties might be able to wash their hands of people and pretend like it never happened, but I expect that for the individuals involved, the reverberations of these media storms will be felt for much longer. Across political parties, claims of seeking to improve diversity are common. But the barriers which keep underrepresented groups out of politics can't be broken down by last-minute efforts to tick the boxes. It's a much longer process which requires support and skills development so that people feel confident to step forward and run for office. Given the way that some prospective candidates have been treated during this election cycle, it's no wonder more people don't want to stand. And considering the cavalier attitude with which some parties seem willing to select and deselect candidates for one of the most important jobs in the country, it's going to be a long road back before voters' trust in our political system can be rebuilt. A column written by Caitlin Logan. The National News on Wednesday the 5th of June. Others must share our stories when we are gone. An article written by Lucy Garcia. One of the last surviving D-Day veterans has said the thousands of lives lost in the Normandy landings during the fight against the Nazis must never be forgotten. Albert Lamond, who is 98, will mark the 80th anniversary of the Allied landings at an event at the Veterans Village in Bishopton, run by veterans charity ELGIN. Operation Overlord, which began on June 6, 1944, marked the beginning of the end of the Second World War, as more than 150,000 Allied troops launched a massive beach assault on the coast of Normandy by air and by sea. A total of 4,414 Allied troops were killed, and more than 5,000 were wounded. Mr. Lamond took part as an 18-year-old seaman a year after joining the Royal Navy. He said, "As one of the last few living witnesses of D-Day, I often find myself wondering about those I served alongside. I once had the chance to visit the Normandy beaches where so many brave souls fought. That experience will live with me forever. It's vital that we teach future generations the true cost of freedom and ensure they never forget the horrors we faced. The memory of all of those who served must be preserved. Our stories must be shared when we are gone, and as a country we must educate to ensure that the world never sees a repeat of the events of the Second World War and D-Day. It's our duty to keep the past alive, so history does not repeat its darkest days." Mr. Lamond was a signalman on HMS Rowley, which was part of the 3rd Escort Group, when it was deployed to rendezvous with battleship HMS Warspite as it travelled to Normandy to shell German troops. HMS Rowley's role was to act as a first line of defence by circling HMS Warspite. The crew was constantly watching for German U-boats and had been told that they would sacrifice their own lives if a torpedo was aimed at the battleship. As a signalman, Mr. Lamond was on the lookout from the bridge throughout the battle, with no cover to defend him, and he said that he has never forgotten the young men who died. He said, "We went up the Normandy coast when I was on the frigate the HMS Rowley. The battleship Warspite's mission was to soften up all the Normandy coast by shelling the Nazis, but it was our duty to protect it. We were constantly getting fired at. The noise was like an express train flying right over your head. It was terrifying. We were expected to put our lives on the line." Our captain said, "If we see a torpedo going to hit the battleship the Warspite, we'll nip in and take the torpedo." We were simply there to defend others. The importance of the mission wasn't lost on us. We knew what we were getting ourselves into. It was horrible. It lives with you forever. It has never gotten easier. There were hundreds of men going ashore. I can still see them. They went from the sea onto the beach, and I saw them disembarking. They were being shelled at from all angles. Some of them never made it. Mr. Lamond had a career on the railways after leaving the Navy and now lives in McKellar House at Erskine Veterans Village. Wing Commander Ian Cumming said, "It's truly an honour to have Albert at Erskine. He is a hero who risked his life for our freedom and should be seen as an inspiration by everyone. As we mark this significant anniversary, it's crucial that we remember not just the sheer scale of what was achieved during the D-Day landings, but also the personal sacrifices made by each individual involved." An article written by Lucy Garcia.
This is from The National on Thursday, 6th June 2024. From the Culture section. Islay. Distillery collabs with comic book artist for exclusive whisky. By Alistair Ferguson. A whisky distillery has teamed up with an American comic book artist to launch an exclusive graphic novel alongside a limited run of their new single malt. Ardbeg Distillery, which is located on the stunning shoreline of Islay, has released its latest single malt named Ardbeg The Abyss. To celebrate the launch of their new tipple, the whisky firm has collaborated with American comic book artist Trad Moore to release a graphic novel which is available exclusively with The Abyss's 400 numbered bottles. The whisky is named after the whirlpool that lies to the north of Ardbeg. Legend has it that Viking Prince Brecon is said to have anchored his ship for 3 nights and days to win the hand of the Lord of the Isles' daughter at Ardbeg. The graphic novel Planet Ardbeg is a story about a prince who travels through space and time to emerge reborn on another planet and was inspired by the tale of the Viking prince and the whirlpool. The 34-year-old whisky is a re-emergence of a fan favourite from 2008 called Ardbeg Corryvreckan, as The Abyss is from a limited few casks of the original run which was stored away. For anyone looking to buy a bottle of the limited run, it will set you back a cool £21,250. Dr. Bill Lumsden, Ardbeg's Director of Whisky Creation, says the powerful taste of the Ardbeg Corryvreckan was a big hit back in 2008, and the distillery is excited to bring it back in its new form. He said Ardbeg, the Abyss, is the stuff of Ardbegian legend. Formed from this rare heart of the original, sought-after 2008 limited release of Corryvreckan, This 34-year-old whisky has been transported by time into a new world of flavour. Held in a tiny handful of those rare, heavily toasted French oak casks, its 400 bottles contain mysterious depths of toasted marshmallows, dark chocolate, pecan nuts and leather, a rare taste of an Ardbeg icon revived and reimagined. To celebrate Ardbeg Corryvrecken's role in the distillery's history, 1,000 limited edition bottles of the core range Ardbeg Corryvrecken are also to be released, featuring a label design by Moore. 4 individual designs will be available, with each one taken from a frame featured in the Abyss's graphic novel. These unique bottles will only be available from the distillery's visitor centre on Islay from June. Moore said, "When I visited Islay, everything felt holistic. The island itself, the people, the stories. From visiting the whirlpool to trying to swirl whisky in the glass, it all felt interconnected. I'm a big fan of mythology, and as soon as I heard the legend of Corryvrecken, I just knew I wanted to reflect the Abyss's mysterious depths through the story of Prince Brecon." On his own journey into mystery, he sees the Abyss, enters the unknown, and is swept up and surprised by what he finds. That article was by Alistair Ferguson. This is from The National on Thursday, 6th June 2024, from the Culture section. The Scottish Highland Infantrymen Who Didn't Dodge D-Day by James Walker. A chance find has revealed that a Highland light infantryman was in the first waves of troops on D-Day. Over 300,000 Allied troops, including dozens of Scottish regiments, were involved in D-Day on June 6, 1944, with commemorations and events held across the country for the 80th anniversary this week. The Highland Light Infantry, which drew its recruits mainly from Glasgow and the Scottish Lowlands, fought through North Africa and Italy during the Second World War, but were allegedly dubbed D-Day Dodgers by Viscount Lady Astor, a Tory MP, in 1945. They later fought in Belgium and Germany as the war came to an end. But a military red book for Highlander Martin Baird, which lists army personnel movements, was found in a loft and reveals him landing in Normandy on June 6, 1944. Grandson Stuart Baird, who found the book, told The National, "My grandfather never told anyone in the family much about his service for the Highland Light Infantry. He took it to the grave. We knew he had served in Egypt, Sicily and Italy from his medals, but he never mentioned France." Stuart added that none of his family has ever known he was in the first waves at D-Day. He had volunteered to serve with the Highlands Light Infantry at the outbreak of World War II in 1939 after his elder brother was killed in a roof collapse in a coal mine. When I saw D-Day on his records, it listed his service but also recorded a transfer to the Royal Armoured Corps. The family knew he served with tank regiments with the Highlanders in North Africa. The Red Book also revealed he was back in England by July 4th, less than a month later, after he was machine-gunned in Normandy and later treated at a military hospital in Birmingham. It doesn't give details of his role, although he had been a tank driver previously and was an experienced driver, according to military notes. The Highland Light Infantry later landed in Belgium in October 1944. Martin recovered from his wounds, married a Women's Auxiliary Air Force servicewoman Grace Coppard, who he had met on the south coast of England before setting sail to Normandy. They settled in Yorkshire, where he worked in the coal mining industry. They went on to have 6 children, and their son George later joined the army and served in West Germany and Aden or Yemen. Martin died in 1985, aged 67. Like a lot of his generation, he was reluctant to talk about his service, even to those he was closest to. I think he had done his service and wanted to forget and get on with his life, Stewart said. After the war, he would attend Remembrance Day events, but it was said he wouldn't wear his medals. He said that men had died in the pits digging coal for the steel mills in Sheffield and never received any recognition. That article was by James Walker.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, Q Review, tell your friends about our service.